Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. You made it to the end of the week. Now, how are those New Year's resolutions working out for you? Have you reverted back to type yet? If not, don't worry. We are what we are, right? Now, after covering EdTech in the last few days and how schools and startups are providing tools to help children learn how to code at a very young age, I now wanted to tackle AdTech and MarTech because we're hearing more and more about how advertising technology and marketing technology are changing the digital landscape. And some think that the worlds of AdTech and MarTech are destined to collide later this year. So in today's episode, I'm going to be speaking with serial entrepreneur Rick Calvillo, and he's from a company called Nanigans. And he's an advertising automation leader specialising in improving retargeting and ad spend allocation, regardless of any channel. So I wanted to learn more about the Nanigans journey, how its approach solves many of the headaches marketers now face, and how incrementally it can help marketers take back control of that ad spend. So buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way back to Boston, which I believe is a giant snow globe at the minute, so we can speak with Rick Calvillo. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Rick. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Rick Calvillo. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Nanigans. We're a 7-year-old company based here in Boston with offices in Boston, New York, San Francisco, London, and Singapore. We're a SaaS platform for optimizing digital media spend across the major digital channels, such as Google, Facebook, and everybody else, focused on the remarketing category or tactic. And we have a novel approach to optimize for what we call incrementality or incremental return. And we believe that the vast majority of advertising, the $300 billion of digital advertising globally, is actually optimized incorrectly on the wrong goal. So we're trying to help people fix that.
Now, you did say incorrectly there, so I've got to ask, traditionally in your experience, how do you think that businesses measure digital advertising space and why it doesn't work in your opinion? And also what they're doing wrong and why they are such expensive mistakes that they're continuously making?
Yeah, I think you have to think about how digital advertising has evolved from the traditional advertising media, I guess you could say. If you think of TV, radio, print, billboard advertising, how do you measure performance? Really, the only way, since you don't know exactly who has seen the ad or not, the best way to measure performance has historically been lift studies, where you show the ads to one segment of the population and not show the ads to another segment of the population and compare revenue of your product or whatever. And the trick is to not introduce bias between those two different segments. So you want the treatment group and the control group to be sort of similar. So advertisers will do pairing of cities. So like in the US, there may be a couple hundred different pairs of cities where the pairs are similar cities in how they react to ads. And half of those cities will see the ad and half of them won't see the ad. And then you'll compare the lift in those regions. When we moved to digital, especially with Google's pay for click search ads, it became possible to know exactly who saw the ad and who clicked on the ad. But I believe, or we believe at Nanigans, that the industry has thrown the baby out with the bathwater by not continuing to do lift studies. So by knowing who saw the ad, it's possible to just say, all right, well, if those people that saw the ads convert, subsequently purchase something or become a customer for the advertiser, then the ads deserve some credit for that conversion. The problem is, especially for large brands and bottom of the funnel advertising, where you're remarketing or retargeting users who've been on your site yesterday, a lot of those users are going to convert anyway without the ad. So the industry confuses correlation with causation.
So at Nanigans, you're actually getting a name for yourself at the moment for redefining how businesses measure that digital marketing success by actually specialising in improving retargeting and ad spend accolation, and which is also regardless of any channel used as well. So, but can you expand on that and tell me a little bit more about how you're doing that?
Sure. The industry today, to expand a little bit on your last question first, the industry today measures digital marketing success using what's called attribution, on an attribution basis. And there are different types of attribution, such as last click based attribution, which is the most common, where the ad that received the last click before the purchase or the conversion gets all the credit. There is a last touch model too, where it could be the last ad viewed or the last ad clicked, or there are multi-touch models where you distribute the conversion credit across multiple ads if multiple ads were seen. All those methodologies of assigning credit for conversions to ads assume that the ads are causing the conversion, right?
Yeah.
And the problem is, if you only show ads to people that are likely to convert, and you don't show ads to people that are unlikely to convert, who's to say whether those people were likely to convert anyway? I mean, imagine you're the marketer for a Broadway show, and I'm the producer, and I say to you, I'm going to give you $100,000 budget to print coupons and give the coupons to potential targets that we want to bring in to see the show, and you say, all right, well, and I say to you, I want to see a very high conversion rate, right? So it's going to cost us money to give out these, print the coupons and give them out, and we want to see a high conversion rate, redemption rate of those coupons. What's to stop you from walking out an hour, 5 minutes before the show and handing out those coupons at in the parking lot next to the auditorium, right? So that's essentially what some digital marketing campaigns are doing, which is they're just touching the user right before they're going to convert, and therefore gaining credit. So it's the only way to know how much is actually incremental is to do a controlled test where you randomly hold back some percentage of the audience and measure their revenue or conversion counts, and then compare that against the treatment group and see how much actual lift there is, how much difference in my example, how many more tickets are sold for the Broadway show by treating those target customers with the marketing or advertising.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your company's journey and where the inspiration actually came from for Nanigans, especially as well for this new approach to help solve so many of those headaches that marketers are facing now?
Sure. So Nanigans, we sort of stumbled upon this need very tactically, I guess. We've been in bake-offs for our new cross-channel remarketing service, which is a software as a service platform, SaaS platform, for large direct response, aka performance advertisers. We have about 100 large advertisers globally, and we got into bake-offs where we were being measured. Smart, sort of forward-thinking marketers said, "Look, we like what you're saying about bringing transparency and control for our remarketing effort or tactics." These are mostly e-commerce companies. Using your software, bringing it in-house, allowing us to do it instead of using, say, Facebook, Google, or Criteo, which are the major alternatives. We'll give you a software product to really take control and do it yourself, your retargeting or aka remarketing against recent site visitors. So when we got into pilots, tests, and bake-offs, a couple of the really smart marketers said, look, we're going to measure you not on these attributed, this some attribution model. We're going to measure you on actual lift. We're going to randomly hold out a certain percentage of the audience, in this case, recent site visitors, and we're going to then segment the population and give half of the users to you and half of the users to your competitor, let's say. And we're just going to measure the revenue at the end of the month, the revenue difference between the control group that should have no marketing or advertising, B, your segment of users that we have sort of persistently assigned to us, and then C, the other segment, which is the competitors segment. And at the end of the month, let's look at how much revenue has been generated by those different segments, and how much ad spend, how much the marketing effort cost, and with those two numbers, we can figure out the true incremental return of the Nanigans platform. So once we started being measured that way by some forward-thinking marketers, we said, oh, well, if we're going to be measured that way, we really want to train a machine learning predictive model to optimize that way, right? And that's how we started down the road of building Nanigans incrementality.
And here in 2018, I mean, you already partnered with major brands like Rue La La La, to mention, just one there, and actually help them optimize their ad spend. But for anyone listening that's learning about you guys for the very first time, and trying to understand how it works, can you offer any use cases that provide an almost before and after picture of what you deliver and offer these people?
Yeah, sure. So we're focused on the following use case. It would be a large e-commerce website that has, let's say, at least 1 million visitors per month, unique visitors. So these are large sites. There are probably a couple hundred in the world that fit that criteria. And we first ask, okay, well, what's your total revenue for the company? Most of the targets have $1 billion or more in total revenue. We ask, well, what's your gross margin on the product that you sell? And that's typically in e-commerce, usually around 20%, let's say. So, all right, so you got $1 billion of top line revenue. You have $200 million of gross margin, product gross margin. Then we ask the question. This is usually we start the conversation with a senior executive, a C-level type executive, either CEO, CMO, CFO. And we ask the next question would be, okay, so what are you spending on digital advertising in total per year? And that's usually, let's pick a number, let's say it's $200 million. And then we ask the question, well, how would you split that? Do you know how much is going towards prospecting versus remarketing, meaning trying to re-engage users you've seen before on your site? And that's usually where the advertiser starts to falter. They may not be able to answer that question definitively. So the next question after that, which they definitely can't answer, usually is okay, of the percentage of the money spent on remarketing, do you know how much of that ad spend is actually incrementally driving revenue? Meaning, okay, let's say a third of your $200 million of digital is spent on remarketing, meaning showing ads to users who've already been on the site recently. So of the 200 million, maybe it's 60 million. Of that $60 million, how much for that $60 million, how much incremental revenue are you seeing? In other words, if you stop doing that 60 million of retargeting or remarketing advertising, how much of your revenue would go away? You said in my example, what did I say, $1 billion revenue?
Yeah.
If you stop doing the retargeting of 60 million a year, how much revenue how much would your revenue go down? Would it go down by 100 million, 200 million? What do you expect? And they usually don't have an answer to that. So that's the opportunity for us, is big advertisers don't know exactly how much of their advertising is driving incremental revenue, meaning net increase in revenue. First, we ask those questions, and then we say, well, what if we could give you a platform that can first measure that? So, okay, great. So what we do is we create a system. We help them put some code on their website that will partition the users into these test and control groups. We then help them. We then build the data system. We have a data system and reporting system that can tell them, help them identify, okay, what is the incremental return for their status quo, for their current tactics. And then the last thing, obviously the most important thing, is we then use machine learning and our predictive models and optimization to help them better advertise and improve that return. Our goal is to at least increase their incremental return on remarketing advertising by 1x, meaning if they're spending 60 million and getting, let's say, 2x incremental return, meaning they're getting 120 million of additional revenue on that 60 million of ad spend, which means they're losing money if their gross margin is only 20%. We would try to improve that, right? So it's instead of getting 2x return on 60 million of spend. We want to make it, say, 3x return. We want to increase it at least by 1x. So we want to, in my example, we want to give them finding at least an additional 60 million of revenue for their $60 million of ad spend.
And I've often thought that most marketers look at stats like CPC and last touch click-throughs and claim success for driving those new customers. But like I said, I often wonder what if those users would have bought anyway, even if they weren't shown an ad. And like your example earlier on in the episode there, it doesn't tell the full story, does it?
No, not at all. It turns out that if you measure the incremental effect of ads, meaning the change in likelihood that the user will buy or convert, the base expected conversion rate for the users is not correlated with the lift of ads. That's a mouthful, but basically, typically on an e-commerce website, the top 10% of the users most likely to purchase your product have, let's say, a very high likelihood relative to the bottom 10%. So there's a very steep fall off, in other words. The top 10% maybe, for example, we've seen in the Rue La La case study that we published, north of a 20% base conversion rate. So if you do no advertising, the top 10% of the people most likely to buy the Rue La La product have a 20% likelihood, right?
Yeah.
So you take that 10%, 2% of them, of the total, they're going to buy in the next, say, 7 days. The next 10% of people likely to buy have only, let's say, a 5% likelihood of buying, right? So there's a very steep fall off of the base, sort of the organic likelihood of conversion for your site visitors. So clearly, if you get credit for based on who you touch with the ad, whether they click on it or view it or not, you are incented. Today's algorithms are only going to show ads to that top 10%, the people most likely to convert. But the reality is you can find lift across the entire audience. It could be that you can move someone from, let's say you show ads to the most likely people, and after you show them the ads, the likelihood of buying goes from 20% to 25%. Well, it's also possible that, the next decile, like I mentioned, the next 10% that are at 5% likelihood could be moved to 10% likelihood. So in both cases, the lift from the ads is 5%. You're finding, if those are equal size buckets, you're finding 5%, you're finding an equal number of new customers for the ads. However, with today's measurement, in the first bucket of top 10% people have a 25%, post-click or post-view, post-advertising conversion rate. In the next 10%, there's only a 10% post-view. So for today's measurement, the ads shown to the top 10% have a 2.5 times better performance, or a 2.5 times lower CPA, if you will. But in the reality is they're equally good.
So I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball now, because we are at the very beginning of 2018. So what are your big ad tech predictions that you think will dominate this year, and also any ad tech trends that you're seeing developing at the moment?
Well, number one, along the lines we've been talking about, we think more and more customers will talk about this word incrementality, which is I think a made-up word that marketers use, but it's essentially how do you measure the effects of a marketing or advertising campaign, correctly, and how do you measure the net increase in revenue? I think you'll see more and more people talking about it, more and more lift studies, as they're called, and then hopefully we will build more awareness about our solution, which is really a predictive lift optimization model, where before you buy the ad, we predict the lift from the ad, and we're bid using that prediction, as opposed to just a lift study where you're sort of in hindsight evaluating the lift, right?
Yeah.
So we think you really want to. So longer term, we think everyone should be bidding using the predicted lift, assuming you can accurately predict the lift. The second thing I think that's a exciting trend in ad tech this year is I think there will be more discussion about how the blockchain can help cut away or eliminate the layers of essentially media resellers in between the advertiser and the publisher. So today, for every dollar of spend that the advertiser makes, the publisher probably only receives less than 50% of that, less than 50 cents. So in other words, if you're in the UK, so if you're British Telecom and you want to put ads on some Yahoo property, by the time you pay the agency fee and an ad network fee and maybe an ad exchange fee and a what's called SSP fee, like your dollar of ad spend probably ends up being 40 cents as received by Yahoo in my example. And so one of the reasons for that, for all that waste, or essentially margin erosion taken by the intermediaries, is because there isn't a way to reliably, with low fees, handle the media sort of clearing media dollars sort of clearing function. If you use a credit card to buy the media, the credit card banks, Visa, MasterCard, take a few percent, 3+%, and every intermediary between the advertiser and the publisher has some risk of not being paid by their customer, right? So. Yeah. The publisher is taking some risk that the ad exchange doesn't pay them. The ad exchange is taking some risk that the agency doesn't pay them. The agency is taking some risk that the advertiser doesn't pay them. So to make up for that risk of not being paid for the media, they have to increase. They have to add some margin to cover the bad debt potential, right? So if every layer adds 10 to 20% of margin on top of the media, that's when you end up with essentially 60% of the margin going, 60% of the cost going to the intermediaries. Whereas if you could use the blockchain, to in real time sort of build the different layers with nominal additional fees and no risk of not getting paid, if you can eliminate that risk of not getting paid for the impression, in other words, if as soon as the impression's been shown, if there's a programmatic way to verify that, then the money gets transferred within seconds, then I think that will eliminate all this waste.
So what's going to be your primary focus at Nanigans this year? And is there also anything else that you could share with us today about what you've got planned?
So our primary focus is to take the remarketing tactic for large e-commerce sites and help them optimize it, essentially help them measure their current performance and improve their performance. That means either if they're spending, either improve the efficiency. So if they're spending, in my example, $60 million and only getting 20 million of net new margin, they're effectively losing $40 million for every 60 million they spend. We can help them increase that efficiency from, okay, if they're going to spend 60 million, they at least want to see, an additional 60 million of net product gross margin, right? To break even on the campaign. But even better, we'd like to say, well, if you spent 100 million total, maybe we can get, typically the goal would be 5x incremental return. So ultimately, if you're making 20% gross margin, if you spend 100 million in advertising, you'd like to see 500 million of net new revenue, right? So our goal is to help large e-commerce advertisers via our machine learning and platform software approach grow their revenue. That's the bottom line. Is if you're talking to a CEO, how can we help you? That's what we want to help them do, right?
Well, a huge thank you for coming on today. But before I do let you go, can I ask you to remind the listeners of how they can reach either yourself or a member of your team if they've got any questions about our conversation today, and also your website details, just so they can find out more information about what you guys do?
Sure. I think info@nanigans.com. The website is www.nanigans.com. Our Twitter handle is @Nanigans. That's NANIGANS. All N's as in Nancy. We're on Facebook and LinkedIn as well. And then if you have any questions, you can email us at info@nanigans.com.
I love what you guys are doing there, and especially because the way that businesses measure digital advertising success is just filled with so many errors and old way of doing things at the moment. But I love the solution that you're bringing to the table here, and I appreciate you taking the time to actually come on and tell us all about it today. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you. I hope it wasn't too technical.
Many marketers still look at stats like CPC and last touch click-throughs and claim success for driving new customers. But what about those who would have purchased anyway? even if they weren't shown an ad, and it doesn't tell the full story. So a big thank you to Rick for coming on and sharing that different side of the coin today. And as always, if you have any strong thoughts on this, please let me know. Why not record a little voice message by visiting techblogwriter.co.uk/podcast. Click the widget. Equally, if you're on a mobile device, just send me a quick email to techblogwriter@outlook.com. Now, I'm off to prepare for CES next week, so have a fantastic weekend. Thanks for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.